Fanalysis takes the analytics made famous in fantasy football combined with the latest sports betting trends to find the best plays of the week. And for that, we turn to the lead betting analyst from Pickswise, Jared Smith. Jared, we open things up with one of the biggest lines we've seen in forever, and that is the Bills giving 14.5 to Jacksonville. This Jaguars offense looks in shambles. And if James Robinson can't play, that huge number, does that look even more doable right now?
Yeah, and I think when, the first instinct when you see a double-digit number, and this isn't just a regular double-digit number, this is a pretty gaudy double-digit number.
I mean, it's over the second key number, right?
Yeah, this is a lot of points, right? That's always what I hear. That's a lot of points in an NFL game. Well, sure, but let's use that in relative terms, because if you think about this Jacksonville team, I really thought, and there were some sharp friends that I have that really liked them coming off the bye in Seattle last week because the Seahawks defense had been playing really poorly. Coming into that game, Seattle was averaging, allowing almost 6 yards per play. Well, Jacksonville only mustered 4.2 yards per play in that game. That is bad. That's, one of the worst. If they average that over the season, they would have the lowest yards per play output in the league because that's a really low number for an NFL team. So I don't really think the Jacksonville offense is going to have a whole lot of success against a Bills defense that's allowing the fewest yards per play in the league. They're the only team allowing less than 5. And then on the other side, you have Josh Allen, who struggled a little bit in the first half against Miami. I give them a pass. That was first of all, they were coming off the bye. Second of all, that was the second time they were facing a divisional opponent in 6 weeks. So there were adjustments that were made, I'm sure, by Brian Flores and his staff, and they were good adjustments, but eventually Buffalo pulled away. And this is the week for Josh Allen because Dak Prescott missed the game last week. Kyler Murray might miss this week. This is the week for Josh Allen to really grab a hold of that MVP trophy, and I think Buffalo's going to put some distance between themselves and the Jaguars on Sunday.
Now, we keep saying that we love to use fantasy football stats to help identify the proper angles. DVOA is defensive adjusted value over average. It's really the most accurate way to rank a defense. So how do these two teams rank in the DVOA standings?
Can I use the term Grand Canyon for how wide the gap is?
I just put the ball on the tee, man. Let you hit it out.
Yeah, there isn't a gap wider in the NFL than the Jaguars and the Bills in the rankings of what you just mentioned. And I agree with you. So there are 3 metrics that I use every week to grade teams. I have my own net yards per play. That's kind of my own personal ranking system. You mentioned DVOA. Football Outsiders does a great job with that. And then the third is point differential, which is a very, simple equation: points scored, points against. And the gap between these two teams in all 3 of those metrics is huge. And that's why I'm fine with laying 2 touchdowns. Now, if it's 14.5, that key number matters. And the way I would kind of skate around it is to play the Bills in the first half. And they're 5-2 against the spread in the first half, which is the most wins against the spread in the first half by any team this year. Few teams are equal to that at 5. So you can play the Bills laying 7.5 in the first half if you're not comfortable laying the full 14 and a hook. If they don't cover the first half number, you can bet the second half spread and still get a little bit of value there because it'll probably be under 2 touchdowns. So there's a few ways to play it. I know it's a lot of points, but I'm comfortable laying it with Buffalo.
And that's why you like playing a game like this, even with the big number, because like you said, you can play it multiple ways. You can play first half, you could play individual props, if you will, but you know that Bills team is that much better than the Jaguars. And, hey, that's why you got to go out there and risk it. That's why it's called gambling here. The Bills, 2.5, or the Bengals, 2.5 point home favorites against Cleveland. Okay, I know Cincy just laid an egg and allowed the biggest upset of the year last year against the Jets, but it's no party in Cleveland right now. Baker is hurt. No. Odell's ego is hurt. Nick Chubb still may be hurt. How do you see this?
This is a fascinating game from a mentality standpoint because you have one team in Cincinnati that showed their age last week. I don't think the Bengals played a bad football game last week. I think they ran into an inspired Jets team, and I think they kind of sleptwalked through certain parts of it. They still scored, 30, 31 points in that game, and they still were in it late, and they had a 2-score lead in the fourth quarter when things went haywire. The late pick right after the Jets scored by Burrow, that amazing play by Shaq Lawson, that obviously tilted the whole momentum of the game. So I'm not really knocking the Bengals down from a good team category based on that loss. On the other side, you have Cleveland. their backs are against the wall, and that does scare me a little bit because that creates some volatility and maybe play calling and how they approach the game. But the Odell Beckham situation, we've talked about it with the Giants in prior years. We've discussed it with this Cleveland team. There's not a lot of love right now. The mojo in the Cleveland locker room, I would assume, takes a hit. So while it doesn't have an impact on the betting line, Odell doing whatever he's doing and not playing and the repercussions of that, I think will filter down throughout that Browns locker room. And I think the key injury that you didn't mention is the left tackle, the right tackle, Jack Conklin, who is out for I don't know if the year, but for a significant amount of time. So Baker is already banged up. He's without one of his best offensive tackles. Odell's not playing. Jarvis is hurt. A lot of negatives for Cleveland. And for Cincinnati, the opposite of the letdown spot. They beat the Ravens and they come in and they get punched in the mouth against the Jets. Now it's the opposite, bounce back spot for the Bengals, and I think they're going to play with a little more vigor this week.
This is a Bengals team that is still trying to figure out how to win. Let's not forget, they were 2-14 2 years ago. They were a 4-win team last year. They still don't know necessarily how to win. They get up for the big games like they did in Baltimore and performed extremely well, and maybe started to feel themselves a little bit here as the AFC champions, the team everybody in the AFC wants to beat, and you're playing a lowly Jets team that's got a backup quarterback, and they got bit. They absolutely got bit. But especially since they would be looking forward to this week against another division rival in Cleveland. Now, but I still want to lay this scenario out here for you because, look, we know that Odell Beckham has not been with the team this week, and with the Giants, Odell was almost like an addition by subtraction when they got rid of Odell Beckham Jr. So I just wonder if, even with Baker's injury, if Cleveland is going to rally around each other, almost like what we saw with the Raiders do when John Gruden, basically let himself go, whether or not this could be a little bit of a scary situation for the Bengals because the Browns might be rallying around one another.
I agree with the narrative, and I like the ability to think positively about a negative situation. Here's, in my eyes, the difference between Gruden and Odell. Gruden is a coach, not in the trenches. Odell has this relationship with Jarvis Landry, and there's a lot of other relationships in the locker room that I just don't know which side each player is going to be on. Do you feel that Odell's being a little bit of a crybaby, or do you feel that Baker should be throwing him the ball more? So I would not be shocked if there is a bit of a split in the Browns locker room, and we have no idea to know how unless we're actually there. So I guess I would err on the side of caution, but also I would bet that there's more of a split in the Browns locker room over the Odell saga than there was about John Gruden, because he's not really in the trenches with the players, and he doesn't have those firm relationships, especially with Odell and Jarvis. I'm fascinated to see how Jarvis plays this week without his buddy.
I don't think that we're revealing anything when we say that Odell is certainly a polarizing individual, no matter what team he's playing on. All right, Green Bay, 7.5-point dogs against the Chiefs in Kansas City. Aaron Rodgers tested positive for COVID, but this is a Packers team that could easily go to the Super Bowl. Are the Sharps seeing that line as an overreaction to Aaron Rodgers not being on the roster?
So this was on Wednesday when this broke. I was fortunate enough to be at my desk because when the news breaks, you get moments before the betting lines become affected. And I took a snapshot of it. It was a pick'em. And then it closed, and then it reopened 8.5.
Oh, my God.
So we got our answer. How much is Aaron Rodgers worth on a betting line? The initial response was 8.5 points. I think that was too many. The Sharps thought that was too many, and that's why the line is now 7.5. In fact, I do see some sevens out there, and I would expect it to close right at around 7, maybe plus 100 on the plus 7. If it's plus 7.5, maybe minus 120. I'll give myself a little wiggle room there. But I do think the line, if I had to peg it, would probably close right around that number. And I still think 7.5 points, Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love difference is probably too much. I think 7 is the floor. I don't think there is one player in the NFL that is worth 7 more points than his replacement in the backup. I find that hard to believe. We're going to find out this week because that line only, we'll get to that game a little bit later if you want, but that got only a point. With 6.5 to 7.5 when they announced Derrick Henry. So I think 7 is too many points for one player. So I'm going to take the value, and I'm going to hope that it's the year of the backup quarterback. We all know what Jordan Love's been doing, what Mike White did last week and what Trevor Siemian did and what Cooper Rush has been doing. So why not Jordan Love? And he's been in the system for 2 years. He's been groomed by arguably one of the best quarterbacks of our generation, and he gets a chance against a brutal, and I say brutal, Kansas City Chiefs defense, arguably the worst unit in the league. And this is a spot. If he's the future of the team, he needs to play well in this spot, and I hope, I'm betting on he'll play slightly above where the market is grading.
Okay, and let's not forget, he's getting, Devontae Adams and Alan Lazard back this week. Not that they're going to need to throw the ball with Jones running against the absolute worst rush defense in the NFL. Will he even need to put the ball up more than 20 times in this game?
I think if he does, that's a problem for Green Bay. And don't forget David Bakhtiari, who I kind of hinted, Mike LaFleur kind of hinted at, or Matt LaFleur kind of hinted at he was going to play this week, because he said he's not going to reveal if he's going to play until later this week. And that, in my eyes, as a coach, kind of, trying to keep their cards a little. He doesn't do a great Bill Belichick impression. Let's just leave it at that.
You can translate coach speak for us?
Face. The poker faces, like Mike McCarthy last week had a terrible poker face about Dak. We talked about it. It was bad. Like, you could just tell that Dak was not 100%. I think Bakhtiari will play this week, and that's huge. He's arguably the best left tackle in the league. So I think there's a lot of positives for Green Bay despite the negative. And I think 7.5 is way too many points for one play. Even if it is Aaron Rodgers, that's too many points in my eyes for one player. I think it's more like 6. So in my eyes, this line should be Packers plus 6.5. And if I'm getting 7.5 through that key number, I feel really good.
All right, your teaser of the week, your play is a 2-team teaser featuring New Orleans, who you're teasing down to a pick 'em against Atlanta. You're pairing that with the Niners teasing up to a 7 against Arizona. What stood out in these games to you?
So with New Orleans, it's just the narrative of, I'm just trying to picture myself watching the game on Sunday. Can I picture Matt Ryan going into the Superdome against a top 5 Saints defense and beating New Orleans? I can't. So that's why the Saints at 6.5, get them to a pick 'em in a low total game. Again, this total is about 41-42. In my eyes, that is a very prime teaser spot. So we don't even have to really get into what the Saints offense may or may not do against the very bad Falcons defense. It could be Taysom Hill. It could be Trevor Siemian. I don't know. I'm going to trust Sean Payton to make the right move. So I feel really good about the Saints side. The Niners side, I'll be honest, this market has moved now to a point where I feel confident that the Niners might close as a favorite. So this was 2.5 earlier in the week. Now it's 1. I got the teaser up to 8.5. I feel good getting it to 7 because that's a key number. And when you look at this Arizona team, it's obvious to me, just like last week with Minnesota, Dallas, the market has gotten wind of Kyler Murray's situation, and he might not play. And if he is going to play, he won't be 100%. On the other side, I think George Kittle's going to come back for San Francisco. And I think this Niners team, this is the buy low spot. Home, first of all, they were one of the favorites to be in the playoffs before it started. Now they're on the fringe, but they have a chance to get back this week, next week against the Rams. These are 2 key games for them. This is kind of their season. And I think the narrative is a good buy low spot, whereas it's sell high on Arizona after their start. So if you get the Niners as a +7, +7.5 home dog, that's a good second leg of the teaser right there.
Here's why I like New Orleans as a teaser in a pick 'em. But the one thing that does scare me a little bit about the Saints is this could be a trap game for them. I mean, they are coming off a big win over the Bucs. Next week, they've got Tennessee. We're in the middle of the season. This is when teams start to let up and start to try to put it in cruise control. Do you fear it's so difficult to try to predict when a team is going to shift down? But this seems to be a spot where the Saints might shift into third.
Yeah, and I think in general, just buy low, sell high. I think the key strategy to winning in the NFL is just to completely forget about what you saw the prior week. It's really hard to do, but sometimes you have to. I think the following week's games actually has more of an impact sometimes than what we saw the prior week, because a lot of times the adjustment, I mean, these guys are pros. They see the same. If you and me can analyze this, I'm sure the coaches and the staff are analyzing the exact same things to a more, higher degree than even the resources that we have at our disposal. So I trust that every week is going to be somewhat contrarian to what we saw the prior week. And when you talk about teams that have been playing poorly, like, maybe the Saints or maybe the Niners, to me, those are still good football teams that have a lot of talent. eventually they will positively regress. And that's why in the NFL, it's all about that push and pull.
That is how he sees the top plays. Make sure you check out our other segment on the Giants game and his other teaser. For Jared Smith of Pickswise, I'm Steve Overmyer. This is Fanalysis.